And on the right, the climate financing expertise on adaptation activities, disaster risk reduction, and technology transfer, mitigation activities in red. And they are really linked. If you look at the middle area there, they're both dealing with natural systems, payment for ecosystem services, and forest management. The gaps currently that are not being covered by CTFs are adaptation via natural systems and red. And we would like to start to get into those discussions and include those as well. CTFs are moving to integrate adaptation and red because of these reasons. Interest from external environment such as donors on channeling resources for climate change action through CTFs. A lot of the donors really don't have the ability or the capacity to start dealing with individual grantees all over the place. There are so many that the CTFs provide, that mechanism that can redistribute their funding and do all the monitoring work that needs to be done. The CTFs know the areas more, know the cultures more about those areas, so it makes a lot of sense for them to be the ones who are doing the work that the donors couldn't possibly do. And then local communities are the ones who are really coming now to us saying, look, we can't just continue to do our conservation efforts really without talking about or putting in place the strategies that deal with climate adaptation. If you go to the islands, those two, on the small islands across Micronesia, those two are really linked. You can't do conservation without dealing with climate change and climate adaptation and mitigation. Those are just really linked together, and we see the signs all over the place. In some, for example, in Palau, they were doing a great job in putting in place protected area networks, and then the bleaching just came and destroyed a lot of those areas that have been protected all these years because they did not put climate change into their strategies while they're building their protected area network. That's just one example of many. What are our challenges? Well, because of the specialized nature of climate change action, within the Conservation Trust Funds, we need to be building the staff capacity, increasing our staff capacity. We also know that we need to expand the technical and project review committee expertise. A lot of us use technical committee and review committees to look at our proposals. And a lot of those that we placed on those committees in the beginning were more people who were knowledgeable about conservation only. Now we're having to add those who have climate change expertise so that they can look at that component of the project as they're being proposed by the local communities. And of course, there's always the absorption capacity, lack of absorption capacity at the community level that we have to be mindful of, and that we are now focusing a lot of our efforts in building that capacity at the community level so that they are able to take these resources and deliver the projects as they should be, so that they can eventually and ultimately assist and help with the local people and their needs. And then the sheer size of funding is also something that this Conservation Trust Funds, a lot of us have been giving, one of the questions that has raised a lot of questions with the Adaptation Fund for the Micronesia Conservation Trust is the fact that we've only been giving small amounts of grants. The largest amount of grant that I think we provided to local communities or local groups is about $100,000, because we are mindful of their absorption capacity and because we also want our funds to go into different communities and not just focus on a few. And so we need to have higher fiduciary standards so that we are able to handle funds and that we are able to convince those who are giving the funding. It's more this latter that we need to convince them that we can handle larger amounts of grants. And then keeping up with the multiplicity of donor requirements. That's been a major problem for us. We've gone through so many due diligence processes with the same groups of donors who have come together to say, we're going to give you funding for this initiative, but each of them has had to come in and do the same process of due diligence to us, which takes away a lot of our time from going out and helping our the people the grantees that we're trying to support. So it would be good for us and those of us who are working in the conservation trust funds, and those of us who are actually like community foundations who are giving grants and receiving grants from these large organizations, to maybe start talking to them about how they can come together to work out a way where you go through one accreditation process that would be accepted to everybody, because it's just really tasking on us. I've got 7 people that work with me. We have up to 20 projects that we're trying to handle, with 3 people trying to handle those projects, and we have to have 3 of us going through these due diligence processes and taking us away from having to support our local organizations, and that's really a problem for us. What would help CTF face these challenges? Capacity building effort designed and implemented to monitor climate change action, guidelines for enhancing internal capacity, fiduciary standards for CTFs, and certification as a national implementing entity maybe once, and not have to go through this by several donors. That's my talk. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much to both those speakers for just those insights into practical issues and some lessons that have come from experience. So what we'd like to do now is to hand over to you. So we go to the third part of our workshop, and what we're interested in doing is hearing from you some of your views. Particularly what we'd like to focus on is, now that we've got the background and we've got the practical experience and examples, just to think what lessons we can learn from what we've heard today, from your own experience.
There's a reason. You're probably not fixing it right. That close enough to the mic.
Well, we'd like to hear from you now. So, for everybody who's spoken, can I ask you, yes, you're sitting down there, thanks. So could we have some questions from the audience, please? I'll come and sit down there too. If people come up to the microphone and ask if they have any questions or clarifications. May will be helping to facilitate this session.
I'm not going to use a mic. Is that okay?
Not for the time.
Yeah.
No, you'll have to grab that microphone. Yes,
So today we heard several things. We heard from Hawaii, and one of the things that Hawaii was that really caught my attention, I don't know about you guys, but was talking about these multi-sectoral collaboration, and what does that mean? And they talked about a little bit about bickering, touched on it just slightly about bickering, and how they wanted to nip that in the bud. And I know many islands face that today. Also within the various challenges, the different countries that are organized within those challenges, I'm sure have very strong special issues. We heard from the Caribbean, and they wanted to know, what does green and islands in Micronesia call it blue? So what do green-blue economies mean? And not looking at it from a more industrial perspective, but from an island perspective. How do we define green-blue economies and put an island face on that? That was what I got from the Caribbean folks. From GLISPA, how do islands lead this? How do islands kind of revolve around this issue of green-blue economies and really apply it and share it, not just at a regional level, but a global level? And how do we utilize GLISPA to kind of lead this forward? And then with MCT, we talked about sustainable financing. And what does sustainable financing mean? How do we, islands, put forward to donors what is important for us? And we detail out what our needs are and not the other way around. These were four things that really popped out in my mind. And what we would like to do is, was there anything within the discussions today that really captured your attention and you would like to hear just a little bit more from our 4 key speakers here today? And the mics are right there. Don't be shy. I see our Grenada friend over there, who I'm going to pick on you because Kate picked on you. Because I have a question for you, because one of the things that Kate was talking about was the Micronesia Challenge and how that came about, and what did the Micronesia Challenge do for the Caribbean that inspired you folks to decide to come forward and do an initiative of your own, but adding that green-blue context to the Caribbean initiative? And could you come to the mic, please?
Good afternoon to everyone. You picked me out. I was just about to go to sleep on the jet lag, but thank you for here. I think way back in 2006, when the Micronesian Challenge was launched at COP in Curitiba. At that time, we were doing some work on protected areas, and the minister felt that this was something that they would like to do. So, inspired by the Micronesian Challenge, we did also launch its own challenge along the lines of the Micronesian Challenge. And this has sparked some support from the Bahamas, and then from there, the Caribbean Challenge was launched. So I think we have to give a lot of credit to the Micronesian Challenge. At some point in the beginnings of the Caribbean Challenge, Willie Costa was invited to our Caribbean meeting, and he gave a very inspiring talk. Most of the participants there thought it was very important, and they reciprocated. I was also sent across to the Micronesian meeting about a year later, and I think it really sparked a very good collaboration between the two challenges, the Micronesian Challenge and the Caribbean Challenge. We owe a real great debt of gratitude to the Micronesian Challenge, and we are hoping now that as a result of the first one, Micronesia, the second one, Caribbean, and the others have come on board, and I think we need to have closer collaboration among all the various challenges. So thank you very much.
It's a bit intimidating having to stand up there, so if you don't mind, I'll just sit down. Just a few questions. One to Aulani on Hawaiian green growth. You mentioned energy, food, and environmental leaders. I was just wondering about cultural, specifically cultural leaders. To Chipper, I wasn't really clear on the relationship between biocultural security and the U.S. Department of Defense. So if you could elaborate on what you mean by biocultural security and the relationship between the two. And for, Nicole? Yeah, it was just on some of the initiatives, I just wanted to share an example in Vanuatu where there's a sort of well-being indicators initiative, which is precisely to try to get into GDP or national accounts, what well-being means in a Vanuatu context. So yeah, I just thought I'd let you know about that if you didn't know, and then we can put you in touch maybe with the people in Vanuatu working on it. Thanks.
I hope I remember the question. Yeah, the first question being, we talked about food and energy coming together with conservation. What about culture? So I think that, and Chipper, I don't know if you'll share the same opinion, but from my opinion, the three sectors, we're talking about them in terms of economic sectors, sectors that are driving investment and development. And we're in a very exciting time, a very dynamic time in Hawaii relative to culture. And I think it's been a deliberate, it is a deliberate approach of many partnerships not to put culture in a box, but that culture actually emanates through all of those sectors and represented by leaders, cultural leaders in all of those sectors, and trying to make sure that that's the foundation. It's not an added sector into the discussion, but rather it's an integrated foundation to all of those sectors. And I think that in these partnerships, we're kind of requiring that more and more, that we're not isolating that discussion to put all the culture stuff here, and then we'll see if we want to negotiate and integrate, but rather as a firm foundation. It's a change that I think we're seeing more and more across all sectors of our community. I don't mean to be overly hopeful or proclaiming that it's all great, but that is really a movement that's very much part of a dynamic aspect of our society, in my opinion, today.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Aulani said, and our GLISPA coordinator, Andre Newman, has really, when she convened the groups, she actually was very careful to select leaders who had culture, who had already integrated cultural perspectives into their ways of thinking and ways of being. So, and that was especially true, I'd say, more in the conservation part of that community. Maybe not so much when you start bringing the utility companies and others. And so, but by bringing these different sectors, economic sectors together, it has allowed culture to become a component of all of the discussion. So it's actually been very, very effective without, quote, defining it as its own sector that needs to be brought in. In terms of your question on the biocultural security, it was really interesting. Department of Defense is mandated, it's not widely known, but Department of Defense is mandated to try and mitigate the impacts that it has in terms of its defense programs. And one of their mitigation aspects was to develop a biocultural security program for Micronesia. And we were fortunate to tag on to that. You saw that slide with all the shipping lanes. We're clearly connected to Micronesia, and what's going on in Micronesia and what's going on in Hawaii, we cannot disconnect that. And so we were able to bring Hawaii into that biocultural region, so really build it into a much broader regional security plan, which is critically important in terms of both of our parts of the Pacific. Did that answer your question?
I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Ask you more later.
Okay. And then, I think you threw out too many questions, so who's next?
Okay, it wasn't a question for me, just, yes, I think the idea that it is research we're doing, we'll be looking to gather what ideas other people have developed in the area of alternative indicators, and there's been a lot of work. So if you have a specific contact, I'd love to get it. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Dr. Chatat from Cameroon. You have addressed the climate change, and I was very, very happy on all what you have said concerning the impact of climate change in Iceland and in many other regions. I'm coming back to a very important matter, that of poverty and addressing climate change. We belong to developing countries, and we are the ones suffering the most from climate change. And we have one of the most important forest reserve of the world in the Congo Basin. Nothing is done up to now to protect it. Nothing at all. And the rainforest is one of the most important sinks of carbon. And when nothing is done to protect the forest, it means that we will be facing more and more global warming. We will be facing the sea level rise with all its consequences in Iceland, and we'll also be facing intensive